You, you who seek my knowledge. You wish to know my thoughts on the great adventure known as Bravely Default 2. Very well, but know this. Once known, it cannot be unknown. But no. You choose a different path. You choose to know only the surface, the minimum, and take the rest on yourself. You steel yourself for the joys and pains to come, and prepare for your own experiences. To default, this is the way. It's been a couple of weeks since the release of Bravely Default 2, the latest Square Enix JRPG for the Nintendo Switch, and I have already finished it, as in full-on 60 hours true ending done. And I can't wait to finish this review so I can play some more. Seriously, this has easily become my favorite game now. There are a lot of reasons for this, but I think I'll be careful and spare you from any spoilers. Bravely is the kind of game that exists for those incredible plot twists, and so I'm going to try my best not to ruin any massive plot points and such in this review. I'd love to talk about some parts in explicit detail, but I'll save those juicy bits for you to experience should you choose to play this phenomenal game. But for now, let's dive in, spoiler-free, and talk about how Bravely Default 2 has stolen my heart and become my new favorite game. If you are new to the channel, a like and a sub would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. So what is Bravely Default 2 if you've never heard of it? Well, it is the third mainline game in the Bravely series, since we have other games like the mobile spin-offs. Now I know that some people think the naming is dumb, but the easiest way to explain it is that this is like the Final Fantasy numbering, where each entry is separate from the last, and Bravely Second is like Final Fantasy X-2, which is a direct sequel. As it was heavily advertised, this game is completely unconnected to the last two games, Bravely Default and Bravely Second, and has an all-new cast of characters and a brand new story for you to experience. So, if you've been concerned about having not played the previous games, no need, this is a perfect spot to hop in and get playing, no prior knowledge needed. Default 2 is a turn-based JRPG, so once again, if you played the Final Fantasy series before, you'll be right at home. One of the game's unique aspects is the Brave and Default system. Very quickly, for complete newcomers, I'll explain. In combat, you have Brave points, or BP. If you choose to default, that character will enter a defensive position and gain 1 BP. If you choose to Brave, you can spend 1 BP to take another action for that character on that turn. You can hold up to 3 BP at once, meaning you can take up to 4 actions on a single character's turn. You can also risk it all and Brave without enough BP to pay for your actions, but if the combat isn't over after you go all out, then that character will be unable to act until their BP returns to 0, leaving themselves completely exposed to the enemy. It's a really fun system that allows you to speed up your level grinding process, as well as attempt various combos and plans that you could never get away with in other JRPGs. And most of all, it brings a freshness into the genre of turn-based RPGs that is most welcome in this modern era. The combat has been changed a bit from previous entries, with the biggest change being the switch from full party planning to individual actions. In the 3DS games, you would plan out your entire party's actions for the turn in one go, and let the speed stat figure out the rest. But in Default 2, everyone acts independently, now having their own pseudo-ATB bars to tell when their turn is coming up. This change may irk series veterans and feel a bit awkward to get used to, as I initially did, but I eventually got used to it and found it just fine. I also had a bit of practice to get used to it, what with playing both of the game's demos and having started playing some of the older Final Fantasies on livestream the last few months before this game came out. Without those though, I think the adjustment would have taken longer, but in the end, I think the change results in a more generally balanced game. At the end of the day, whether it's full party mode or individual actions, I'm just happy to be playing Bravely Default again. The Brave and Default system is so much fun and super satisfying to use. It's my favorite gimmick of any JRPG I've played. There were numerous times during my playthrough where I just kind of smiled when I braved to clear out a wave of enemies. Yeah, it felt that good, like a welcome home. Back on the topic of older Final Fantasies, if you happen to have played FF5 and enjoyed it, then you'll be even happier with this game. Not just because of how much Bravely Default 2 pays respect to that game, but because this game has an intuitive job system. Default 2 has 24 different jobs for you to swap around between your characters and try out different combinations on. Every job also includes a unique outfit that character will change into, and you can have a secondary job equipped alongside the main, allowing for use of abilities from both while in combat. Wish that your Berserker's Amp Strike could be combined with the Monk's Firebird ability so you can weaken the enemy before hitting them hard? You can do that. Want to have a Red Mage that can double cast all spells, use Blizzaga from the Black Mage 8 times on a single turn? You can do that. Endless possibilities await with this game's job system. And you can equip as many people as you want with the same job if you choose. Want to clown out and have everyone be a gambler? That's an option. On top of that, some jobs will have passives in their kit that you can equip and use outside of the job itself. Maybe you want MP Saver from the Beastmaster to lower the cost of your healer's spells, or maybe you want to have Dual Wield from the Phantom on your Berserker so that you can hold 2 axes and have no damage reduction for doing so. Bravely's job system is so customizable, and hence there are innumerable team builds you can choose from for every purpose imaginable. My own channel's origins came from making build videos for the previous Bravely games, so that should already show you just how many comps you can create. And yes, you can still break the game with some nutty builds, but it's more so single character ones than comps that use multiple people to work, I find. It's also really nice that the party has the same starting stats, so you can have anyone be whatever you want them to, and then use buns to make them better at those things later on. I'm glad they've reduced the number of jobs down to 24. Second really showed how you can spread yourself out too far with its 30 jobs and how the majority felt good or alright, but not great all the time. This game has refined the jobs down to a nice, concrete amount, and nearly all of them feel useful to some degree or other. There's something in nearly every job that I want on my comp, either as a usable set of abilities in combat, or some kind of passive to make a certain character stronger, and therefore it makes each job much more desirable than ever before. I just love playing around with all the different classes and making new combos. It's just so much fun. The only issue I had in particular was the JP grinding. I'm used to switching between jobs all the time and grinding for what I want, though some others may find that tedious. But this time, I could really feel the grind when I attempted to do it the traditional way of just fighting every enemy I came across. Eventually, I figured out that consecutive battles are the way the developers intended you to go, and so if you're having trouble level and job grinding, start using those monster treats. Trust me, things will start going a lot quicker if you do that, and that's when the grinding became a lot less of a chore. I just had to realize it first. That aside, I was missing Octopath's pay for what you want system over this more traditional unlock system sometimes, but otherwise, the grinding isn't that bad. While we're talking about gameplay stuff, I'm just going to cram the open world dungeons and other side activities all under gameplay for this section, just to make things easier. While Bravely has always had the world map to travel across, Default 2 has expanded that concept into an entire open world to explore. Much like Octopath, I love the realistic, tangible distances I have to travel, and moreover, I love the decision to go with avoidable encounters instead of the set encounter or random encounter methods. Being able to directly control when I want to fight and offering different battle bonuses to either myself or the enemy depending on how it starts gives the combat that little extra kick that makes fighting more interesting. And the consecutive battle system, I feel, has been improved upon from second, and is a lot easier to make work as it just gives you a random number of extra battles compared to needing first turn victories to keep it going. This not only balances your ability to grind so you don't go absolutely overboard like in second, but it also makes it easier for early game players to do, so it's right there in the middle and I appreciate that. The dungeon designs are also quite nice. All of them look pretty unique from one another, and some even have puzzles, which is nice. I actually feel like I'm exploring a place rather than walking from one end to the other rather easily, so the trip is worth something. There's also all kinds of different areas to explore and chests to find, and, well, I might as well address it. Lots of grass for you to cut. You might as well pretend this game has a lawn mowing simulator packed in, because honestly, doing it like Link and cutting some grass actually yields some pretty awesome results. Same with foraging with the Freelancer. Outside of the main story, there are plenty of side quests to do, either for entertainment, learning more about the characters in the world, or just to gain some really sweet equipment. On top of all this, you have two really neat mini activities thrown in, Exploring and B&D. Exploring takes the place of the Rebuild the Town minigame from previous entries and allows you to get some items when you're not playing by leaving the game in sleep mode, which is really helpful. I just wish it dropped more stuff, but you get a lot from cutting grass already, so it's understandable. Plus, the items you usually get from going boating are pretty nice, like stat boosting buns or orbs that just give free experience or job points. B&D is a new card game that was added to pass the time and involves trying to control more spaces on a board than your opponent. I think it's pretty fun, and I want to play around with it more in the near future. In the visuals department, I think the game looks good. It's not spectacular or breathtaking, but I think it looks fine. I think the characters all generally look good, and the models feel like a reasonable evolution from the chibi style of the 3DS games, mixed in with a dash of the fully rendered cutscenes from said games. The job outfits all look incredible too, with flashy and colorful designs that just all look great on the cast. This is definitely the most diverse and visual aspect of the game, I would say, these job outfits. The open world looks fine as well, lots of open space to run around and fight baddies in, but also some cool details here and there. I am also so glad they were able to keep the watercolor look of each town as well, as if you're running around on a painting. They look just so nice, and the different angles the camera takes as you move through a city gives it more depth than just being a painting. The monster designs are also fairly solid in general, combat effects look cool, and special animations are a lot of fun. There are some animations that make me nauseous to look at, like when I was fighting the Thief boss and the camera decided to go all Tony Hawk on me, but some others are really neat, and I can't show my favorite one without spoiling, but trust me when I say that there's some really cool ability animations in this game. The music of Bravely Default 2, dear God, Revo has returned to us once more to deliver another absolute masterpiece of gaming music. This soundtrack is just as incredible as the first, with a new feeling to it that fits this new world and story perfectly. And despite there being no returning songs from previous games, the music still makes clear references and callbacks to pieces from the OG soundtrack. One boss theme had me in tears when out of nowhere, the leitmotif of a song that's been burned into my head suddenly appeared, and so despite the brutal difficulty of the boss, I kept wanting to play, praying for that song to never end. It was like a love letter to Bravely Default fans everywhere. All four of the character themes have so much personality to them, like each one is incredibly distinct from the others. Some of them were not all what I was expecting, and yet I still love them, and they fit super well to the character they represent. That aside, can we talk about how many combat themes this game has? Revo really worked his ass off on this one because you have 2 normal combat themes, a rare monster theme, and 6 different asterisk holder themes. 6! This is insanity! And it's absolutely awesome because not a single one of these boss themes are bad. They just get better and better as you go along. And then you got even more boss themes on top of that. And then there's this awesome panic song that plays during a cool part of the story. And then there's the final boss theme, and it feels like my head is about to explode. It's just, there is so much good music in this game. The town themes are extremely befitting, from Halcyonia's song that's as gentle as the breeze, to the mysterious and mystical theme of Wiswald. Even the overworld theme has different versions depending on what region you're currently in. The indoor dungeon theme was so good, I was bopping to it the first time I came across. My head was physically dancing around to the tune. So much effort, and it really shows. And without saying anything, yes, the final boss theme slaps. It's absolutely amazing, and I'm blown away by how Revo could compete with, possibly even outdo, the musically complex beast that is Serpent Devouring the Horizon. Just everyone give Revo a round of applause. The man deserves it, and more, in absolute earnest. One topic that I had to address was the game's difficulty. I'm both in love with and annoyed by how hard this game is, so it's both good and bad. I'll preface this section by saying this. Bravely Default 2 is hard, like a fair bit harder than its predecessors. This mostly comes in part due to the new counter mechanic on nearly every enemy in the game, including bosses. Enemies now have the ability to counterattack whenever you do certain actions, be it attack them, use an item, heal yourself, whatever it is. Pretty much anything you can do in combat could be a counterable ability to an enemy. Now, on one hand, there were times where this mechanic was a bit frustrating. Sometimes the counters feel extremely arbitrary and bullshit, and other times they are so vast and easily triggered, like counter any damage, that they will just proc endlessly and give the boss a lot more actions than you'd probably prefer. And with the mechanics of the fights already being a tad bit harder than previous installments, the counters just bump up that difficulty tenfold. I played through the game on normal, and I still had a really hard time on some of the bosses, which unfortunately might be a sign that would scare off or annoy any newcomers that the game is trying to bring in. But on the other hand, this level of difficulty was welcome. As a Bravely veteran, I was pleasantly surprised by how hard this game was compared to Default and Second. It made me want to try harder, to play better. I felt so much more free to explore multiple options when taking down bosses, and the satisfaction when I managed to defeat a boss was overwhelming. And it felt good when it was my own ability and practice and adaptiveness that beat the boss, instead of just running around in circles for hours on end and then creaming the boss with big numbers so I didn't actually have to try. And even with really broken builds, the bosses still hurt because they hit hard regardless of what you do. So while I do find this game more difficult than previous games, I think it's nice to have a Bravely game where I can do these ridiculous combos that would otherwise destroy the game in previous entries, but still have the boss fights be a difficult and rewarding fight too. And plus, when the music slaps this hard, you kind of feel invigorated to keep on fighting. Now, I'm still not going to spoil anything for Default 2, I promise you that. But I saved this part for last because this is honestly the best part. I already praise the combat and the music so heavily, but the story and the characters, this is truly what made Bravely Default 2 my new favorite game. Bravely Default and Bravely Second, I love those games. This game, I adore. This game's writing is absolutely incredible. You could watch every single trailer a million times, catch every tiny little detail, and you would still be caught off guard by how incredible this game's story is and all the twists that it has stuffed in. The first few hours, I was enjoying it. I was like, okay, this is good. And then I hit the first major plot twist and I was instantly hooked. And from there, I was taken on this incredible journey of twists and turns, love and hatred, highs and lows for the parties, just an absolutely wild ride. Seriously, if you love plots with insane twists that just leave you breathless, you'll love this game. I feel like I was actually a part of the group traveling alongside them, and I got to experience their bonding firsthand. Look, I love the OG cast, but I gotta say it. These guys are better. They're so much more compelling and interesting characters, and they go through so much growth. I like Anya's, I really do, but she's kind of a one-track character. She wants to save the crystals. Alright, fair enough. Let's look at Gloria, same type of character. But over the course of this game, you see the party trying to get her to relax and enjoy life in once in a while, to stop and smell the roses, if you will. Even Seth is the best player character. His profession as a sailor comes up time and again in discussion, and he actually feels like he's knowledgeable on the subject and likes it. Tiz being a country bumpkin, I can't really recall him ever talking about herding sheep or planting crops or just general conversation about his life in Norende other than obscure, nice things. Seth, I get to know him as a character. He's not just a puppet. And not just the main cast, the villains and side characters are all wonderful too. Some of them have really interesting histories to them, and you get to learn all about them as the story goes on. But it's never enough. You just want to know more and more and more about them, because they're such intriguing characters, and their performances, generally speaking, pretty dang good. I think the voice acting in this game is a lot more compelling and emotional than previous entries, and the accents help a lot in that regard, I believe. Some performances are a bit weaker or lack the same polish as the main cast, I do admit, and while I don't want to just shift the blame for this game's small handful of mishaps on the current world state, I feel if that situation was going to affect anything, this would be the category it hits the hardest. And alongside some generally great voice acting, you have some incredible cutscenes. Seriously, there are scenes in this game that are movie-level quality in their framing and camera angles. They're just so good. The performances, the cutscenes, the music, all of these come together to brilliantly tell the story, which has by far the darkest and most interesting concepts of all the Bravely games. There's a lot of shocking moments throughout that'll just make you jump up in surprise, fear, or joy. The entire plot kept me engaged and wanting to turn the page to find out what happens next, and then the next page this happens and I just can't stop there. Just one more chapter. It was just incredible. There are some things I wish would be developed a little further, but certain answers, not all but a certain few, I think need to be found through your own exploration of the game. Some of the late game stuff I had to have a sit down and think about on my own time because it's a bit more subtle and not so in-your-face obvious this time around. I love the story, I love the characters, and I really, really hope we get a sequel to this one. I just have no idea what it would be named. When I finished this game, I went back and watched some footage from the original Bravely Default and tried comparing it to Default 2. And what I felt was a shift, a change of feeling. I realized in that moment that these games have two very distinct feelings. Bravely Default had its own kind of charm to it, and Bravely Default 2 has its own charm. They are different feelings, but both were of happiness, enjoyment, and excitement. Just different, and I love them both for that. While Bravely Default 2 might be unconnected to the other two Bravely games, there are plenty of references and callbacks to the previous entries for returning fans to find. And since it is a completely new title, then it is a welcome start for new players of all kinds. Bravely Default 2 is everything I expected going in, and so much more. I had high hopes for Austin and team, but this surpassed them in every degree. It's fun, it's imaginative, it's visually good, musically stunning, challenging yet rewarding, and has a fantastic story and cast to tie everything together. And all the while, it pays its respects to the turn-based genre with various references and callbacks throughout. It has literally become my new favorite game in just a week of playing. I don't know how they could top this, and should the unfortunate yet unlikely fate come that they never get to try again, then at least the series can end on a note like this, as a pair of open arms for newcomers to begin and sadly end their Bravely adventures, and as a love letter to current Bravely fans. I pray that is not the case, and I already have my fingers crossed waiting for a new day to come so that more of these games of this wonderful series can be announced, my favorite game series of all time. But even then, while I wait, I can still look back fondly and remember the intense emotions that these games gave me. First, Bravely Default was my favorite game. Now it's Default 2. And maybe somewhere in the future, another Bravely game waits, ready to claim that pedestal. Thank you for watching this default edition of my Bravely Default 2 review. If you would like to see a version of this review where I speak more openly about why I love this game, with full spoilers included, be sure to check out the Brave edition on my channel. If you enjoyed the review, then a like and a sub are always welcome and appreciated. Thank you for watching, have a lovely day, and I'll see you soon.